class, here we are at the end of chapter 10. We're going to learn about how to write the equation of a circle and how to graph a circle, and then do some extra algebra things at the end. So the equation of the circle actually comes from the distance formula, because all the points on a circle are equal distance from the center point. The distance formula can be used to write that equation. So this would be the distance of the radius. So instead of writing D, I'll write R for the radius. And I am going to say that that center point is HK, just to distinguish that, and that's the way you'll see it in the formula also. And this other point is a point on the circle at any point, you know, with the X part and then the Y part of the coordinate. So I'm just going to take the X, Y, and the HK and substitute these into the formula. So X minus H, that's the X value of the center, plus Y minus K, that's the Y value of the center. And this is one version of the equation. The way that you'll usually see it, though, is without the square root sign. The way that you'll usually see it is R squared equals X minus H squared plus Y minus K squared. And you might see like the R squared on this side. That's actually how I tend to write it, but it's the same exact thing. When you square this side, you square the radius, and this would be your equation of the circle.
So I wanted to show you guys here what's going on with the equation of the circle. If you notice that when I take this and I move the center, it kind of snaps it into place. So remember, the equation is X minus the X value. Here the X value is 0, and then Y minus the Y value. When that Y value becomes negative, it actually ends up making it X plus 1 and Y plus 1. It's kind of the opposite of whatever that would be. If I take this and change the radius, you can see how that circle moves, and that radius is going to be that exact distance the whole way around.
So these first several things ask us to write the equation of the circle. It gives us the center point here. So this is the X value, which they use the letter H, and K would be the Y value of the center, and it gives you the radius 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take these points and plug them into the equation. So X minus the X value, so that's going to be X minus 1 squared, plus Y minus the Y value, or K in this case, is negative 8. So you have to remember what happens when you subtract negative 8, and then the radius is 7 squared. This is basically just your answer. I would ask that you clean this up a little bit and you just rewrite it as X minus 1 squared plus Y plus 8 squared equals, and I would just make that 49. And that would be your answer. That's all you got to do. For this next example, it doesn't give us the points, but it shows us in the graph where they're at. So the center here is at the center here is at 0, 4. And if you want to write that out, you can. And the radius is 1, 2, 3. The radius is 3. So I'm going to write that as X minus 0 squared plus Y minus 4 squared equals 3 squared. Just plugging those numbers in to this spot, and this spot in the equation. And then to clean this one up, I don't really need to subtract 0, so I would just write that this is X squared plus Y minus 4 squared equals 9. For this next one, the origin would be 0, 0, and the radius is the square root of 10. This one cleans up really nice, a little better than maybe what you would think. When you subtract 0 and subtract 0, it's going to just be x squared plus y squared. And think about what happens when you square a square root. This would be the square root of 100, which is simply just 10. And that's the way that equation would look. For this next one, the directions change a little bit because here they give you the diameter. Just make sure you pay attention to that. If they give you the diameter, you need the radius for the formula. So the center is at 4, -1. So that formula would say x minus 4 squared plus y minus -1 is really going to be plus 1 squared. And that equals the radius. Make sure you do the radius squared. So the radius is 4. So 4 squared is 16. And you'll get good enough at these, I think you can just kind of write that out. If it helps you though to kind of write it out rough first and then write the answer, that's fine too. So this last one, this is the toughest one out of this group because they don't just say what the radius is, they give you the center and then they give you another point. So you have a little work to do first. You need to find the radius, and to find the radius or the distance between those points, we need to use the distance formula. So when I do that, I'm going to subtract the x values. So that's 1 minus -3. Subtract the y values. That's -2 minus -2. So this is going to be 4 squared, which is 16. And this is going to be 0 squared, which is 0. So the radius is 4. So make sure you go with the center. This one doesn't really need to go in the formula anywhere. And what the radius is. So that's going to be x minus -3, which is really plus 3 squared, plus y minus -2 is positive 2 squared, equals the radius squared, which is 16. So for these next ones, the directions change. They give you the equation and they ask you to state the coordinates of the center, the measure of the radius, and then graph. So for this one here, if you think about how that equation would be if you had everything written out, it's going to be, and the radius would be 3 squared because the answer is 9. So the center is at 0, 1. One thing you got to make sure you pay attention to is a lot of times students think it's at -1. Remember that that equation is y minus the y value squared and x minus the x value squared equals the radius squared. So it's kind of the opposite of whatever it looks like because that minus sign's already part of that equation. So the center is at 0, 1 and the radius would be 3. So what you're going to do is you're just going to go to 0, 1. And if the radius is 3, that means 3 in every direction. And you can't really go 3 diagonally without having to do, a little more work. Then what you can do is you can grab a compass and just draw in that circle. So starting from the center, whoops, this is not going to be right. So I tried using the circle tool and it wouldn't let me just start at the center, so I'm going to do my best to just kind of sketch this in. And if you don't have a compass handy, you can always just kind of sketch it in also. This would be your circle through those points and with the center at 0, 1. For this next one, again, think about the way that this equation would have to be. It would have to be x minus what x value? So it'd actually be minus -1 and y minus 2. So that's going to make the center at -1, 2, and the radius is at, or is going to be 2. So I'm going to go to the center point, -1, 2, And if the radius is 2, I'm just going to go 2 up, 2 to the right, 2 below, and 2 to the left. And again, I'm just going to do my best to kind of sketch in that circle. And again, this is just kind of a sketch. If I had a compass, or if I could use the circle tool on here and have it line up right, that would be much better. For these next two examples, these are more complicated because they're not already in that standard form. You need to write them in standard form first. And in order to write them in standard form, you need to remember something else from algebra, completing the square. And depending on how much you spent time with quadratics last year, you may or may not remember this. So I'll just kind of give you a brief summary, at least for what we're going to need to do for this lesson. So completing the square, it says here to complete the square for any quadratic expression in the form x squared plus bx. So we want to figure out what's going to make that a perfect square. Follow these steps. So we're going to find half of b, we're going to square the result of that, and then we're going to add that to our equation. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to kind of get this set up in the correct format. I want the x squared and the negative 4x to be together. I'm going to have to add something to that, so I'm going to leave a blank. Then I'm going to put y squared plus 6y together. And again, I'm going to have to add something to that, so I'm going to leave a blank. And then I'm going to just have this negative 9 on the other side of the equation, and that's where the radius is going to be. So you might be thinking negative 9 cannot be the radius, and you are exactly right. When we add things over here, we'll have to add it to each side of the equation to get it to balance out. Okay, so for this first one, following these steps, I'm going to take half of b. So half of negative 4 is negative 2, and then I need to square that number. So negative 2 squared is a positive 4. So when I add 4 to the left side of the equation, I need to add 4 to the right side of the equation. For this next one, half of b, so 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 3 squared is 9. So again, I can't just add 9 to the left side, I have to add it to both. Now I have this to where I can factor each of these and get this in standard form. When I add this stuff together, that's just going to be 4. When I factor this, it's going to be x minus 2, and this one's going to be y plus 3. And if you don't remember doing this, it's not a huge deal. What you're going to end up doing is just whatever you got when you had half of that, that number goes here. So if you can think about like whatever this was, that goes in that place, and whatever was in here before you square it, that goes in that place, and I think you'll be okay for what we're doing. So to finish the directions for these, I'm not going to have you graph it, but to finish this, I would say that the center is at 2, negative 3, and the radius is 2. And then this last one's another one kind of just like that. I'm going to follow those same steps. I just wanted to show you this twice. So I'm going to first kind of get this set up to where I have the things in the right spots. So get the x's together, leave a blank. Get the y terms together and leave a blank. And I'm actually going to subtract that 40 over to the other side because that's where it's going to need to be at the end. Oops, I forgot a y here. Okay, so half of b, so 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 4 squared is 16. So I'm going to add 16 to that side. I add 16 to this side. For this term, it's negative 14. Half of that is negative 7. When you square it, you get 49. So I'm going to add 49 to each side. Remember, when you factor this, it's going to be whatever this part was. That was a positive 4. So x plus 4 squared plus y minus 7 squared equals, when you add those up, you get 25. So the center for this is -4, 7, and the radius is 5. So we'll practice this in class. I'm expecting you guys, especially if you don't remember doing this last year, to have some questions about it, and we can do some more work in class with it. For this one here, it says we need to write the equation of a circle that contains these points. This is going to be by far the easiest to do if you have them graphed. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that quick. 1, 2. We have -3, 4, and -5, 0. So when I'm trying to figure out where the center of the circle is, it's going to help if you can take those points and connect them like that. This is actually, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And this is going down 1, 2, over 1, 2, 3, 4. So even though this doesn't maybe quite look like it, those are perpendicular. So if I take this, I could make a right triangle out of it. And then I could see here where that center point is going to be. So that center point is actually going to be right there if I take this and bisect that side. And if you can't tell, this is going up 1 and over 1, 2, 3, going up 1 and over 1, 2, 3. So this is the very center of that side of that triangle. This is going to be the very center of the circle. So the center is at -2, 1. And then I can find the radius. Any one of those would be the radius. So what I would do is I would either use distance formula, or you could even just like think what the Pythagorean theorem would be for the length of one of those sides. I'm just going to do it with the Pythagorean theorem. We have it going down 1 and over 3. So that would be 1 squared plus 3 squared equals whatever the radius is going to be squared. So this will be 10. The radius squared is 10. If you want to take the square root of that, that's fine. But if you can remember what you need when you're plugging it into the formula for the equation of a circle, you're going to need to square the radius anyway. So I think I would just leave that as 10, and that's how you can do that one. For these last two, I would be setting up a system of equations. What I want to do is I want to find the points of intersection for these, and setting up a system of equations is how you can do that. The best way I think to do this would be to use substitution, because you already know that y equals this. I would take that x plus 8 and plug it in place of the y here. So I'm going to do that. X squared plus x plus 8 squared equals 32. And then I'm just solving this problem. I am going to have to think about x plus 8 times x plus 8 and FOIL that in order to get the answer. So x squared plus, this would be x squared plus 8x plus 8x plus 64 equals 32. Go ahead and clean this up a little bit. That's going to be 2x squared plus 16x plus 64 equals 32. I have some choices here as to how I want to solve this. One thing that you could do is go ahead and get this in standard form. So 2x squared plus 16x plus 32 equals 0. I could even divide 2 out of each of those. I'm going to go ahead and do that before I use the quadratic formula to solve this, just so I don't have to put as big of numbers into that. So for this one here, quadratic formula would be the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So negative 8 plus or minus, this is going to be 64, and when I subtract this, that's also going to be 64, so that's actually going to be plus or minus 0 over 2. So this one only has one answer. It's negative 8 over 2, which is negative 4. So this is what x equals. Because this is asking for the point, I need to give the whole point. So the x coordinate of the point is negative 4. And then you can plug that into either one. I would definitely recommend just plugging it in here. So when x is negative 4, that's going to make y positive 4. And this one would only have one point where this line and this circle intersect. There are some other choices here too. They could intersect at 2 points. If you have a circle and the line goes through it, it could intersect at 1 point, like here when you have a tangent line to a circle, or they might not intersect at all. So this last example, again, I would use substitution. This one ends up working out a little easier because we're not going to end up with having to use the quadratic formula. So when you plug negative x in for y, I get x squared plus negative x squared equals 8. For this one, I have to, when I square that negative, it's going to end up being a positive. So x squared plus x squared equals 8, or 2x squared equals 8. That makes x squared equal to 4, or when you take the square root, you need to make sure that you remember there's actually 2 different answers that would work for that. So one of the x values is going to be positive 2, and one of the x values is going to be negative 2. Again, that's not the final answer because what I need to do is I need to come up with the points. So if the x value is 2, then y equals the opposite of 2, which is negative 2. And if x is negative 2, then y will be positive 2. So in this case, there's actually 2 points where they're going to intersect, and those are the 2 points. So we'll work on this in class, and I hope you guys will ask a lot of questions when you have them.